Episode after episode, page after page, who hasn't read a webtoon or manga that left you thirsting for more? Be it highbrow or literary trash, there's ways to go about a comic to keep audiences engaged. And I'm here today to show you how to do it right. You may be asking, Saba, what are your certifications? None, really? I don't really have any. I'm just pretending to be an authority on this, to stroke the long shaft of my ego, I suppose. But you still might learn something, so stick around. Ignore my disheveled appearance. I didn't want to get dressed today, to be frank. So I didn't. Today, I will walk you through how to make a narratively and visually compelling comic, and talk about some of the biggest mistakes artists tend to make when making their first comics. I'm Saba, a black sheep. Have you any soul? No sir, no sir. But today, I will yap profusely while you listen, like we tend to do almost every other week. But before we delve in, commit arson on the like and subscribe button, and join our community Discord if you want, or check out the Etsy shop with this epic Dutch Vanderlyn shirt I made. I love Dutch Vanderlyn. He's so well written. Without further ado, we begin. Do your comics look something like this? Mostly oh my god. Badashi. Mostly just floating heads talking to each other with no background, long speech bubbles, and just random extra characters you don't need. I love you. You're amazing. But this is dog caca. This is shite. And this will turn away almost every single potential reader you'll ever get. So, how can we avoid this? Well, we have a few steps. I have a few steps for you. Step 1, overview. Step 2, scripting. Step 3, storyboard. Step 4, draw. And step 5, lettering. I will now walk you through every single one of those steps, while also taking a fat dump on everyone that does them wrong. Yeah. Step 1, overview. No matter if your comic's going to be thousands of pages with 50 installments, we need to remember to have levels. Think of it like a dungeon in a video game. The end goal is defeating the boss at the end, right? But we have rooms before that we need to fight through. Each room has its own complete story and satisfying end to that narrative, but not the overarching narrative. It should slowly build up to the overarching narrative. To keep our audiences engaged, we have to give them little wins to want them to keep coming back for arc after arc. For this video, I will write a short comic within the world of my long-planned comic called Usurper Prince, which will show you all the key elements of creating an engaging story. So, we need to come up with a problem and solution. Let's start with my character Volkarn, is a traveler with a prosthetic leg. He is in a dry prairie town and has found himself low on oil for his limb. So he goes out looking for some oil, and he runs into some predicaments. Okay, now we got the synopsis, now we need the problem and solution. The town doesn't have the oil he needs. Fed up, he begins to leave town but is stopped by a shady merchant band, who has the oil he seeks but for a price. The merchant just could kill for some deer stew, but can't hunt one as the band's hunter is sick, so Volkarn is sent. Volkarn finds hunting quite hard as his leg keeps squeaking, scaring the deer, and he finds he is no good using a bow. So he makes a trap for the deer, waits, and then kills it with his bare hands. He returns to the merchants covered in blood in a mutilated deer carcass. Though unsettled by Volkarn's methods, the head merchant finds him charming, so he gives him the oil. Since they're headed to the same town, Volkarn joins the merchant band for some time. This is a good overview for a short story. It allows us to get a feel for the characters, but have a reasonable goal ahead of us as the reader. Of course, Volkarn has an incredibly complicated story as to why he is traveling, but we don't need to burden our readers with that yet, because they do not give a shit about him. No one does. You have to make them care. One of the biggest mistakes artists make is assuming the audience gives a flying crap about your generic ass characters. Prove they ain't boring, then I'll listen. No matter how cool their design is or story is, no one starts out a story with actually caring about your characters. So please, do not info dump, show, don't tell. Step 2, scripting. Scripting is incredibly important. It makes sure your pacing and narrative flows naturally. If you want your comic to read the best it can, you need to know what is going to be said and how it will help the plot move forward. I could have my characters pointlessly fight over if pigs or rabbits are better, but that does nothing to serve the plot and message of the overall story. Now, it could serve to show the brotherly bond between characters to later set the tone for a plot point, but that's why it needs to be intentional. When you are scripting, you need to ask yourself these questions. Is this something someone with this character's life experience, personality, coping mechanisms, and culture would say or do? Does this help the story move forward or set the tone to enrich the reader's experiences? There are many things that can honestly be left out to have more impactful content instead. Here's the script I made for this short story. From the overview to the script, some details changed to create a fuller story. I'll give you the synopsis. Volkarn is staying at a local inn. The comic starts with him fiddling with some tools trying to fix his mechanical leg. Frustrated, he laments that he needs fire oil. He leaves his room for the market where he goes to shop after shop but is denied any oil. He even goes to a shop called Fire Element Goods and still can't find any oil. Frustrated, as he searched all day, he begins to leave town. Dusk quickly approaching as he confines himself to a night on the road to the next village, only to be stopped by this strange man. The scrawny man tells him he noticed he needs fire oil, and that he had some but would only give it to him on one condition, that Volkarn hunt an ivory elk for him. Volkarn goes to the forest to hunt as the strange man Irit returns to his merchant camp nearby. While in the merchant camp, Irit's fellow gang member Phoebe chastises him for pawning off his illegal poaching job on a stranger. Back to Volkarn, he finds that his squeaky leg scares away the elk. When he tries to use the bow, it breaks due to him pulling it back too far. Frustrated, he chases after the elk, burning its legs with his, for lack of a better word, magic arm. He takes the elk back, where the leader of the caravan is mad at Irit, but is interested in Volkarn's abilities. As they're headed to the same city, Volkarn joins the gang. As the caravan is leading, we get a wide shot where it shows Volkarn's wanted poster explaining why the townsfolk refused to sell to him and why they were acting weird. As you can see, thanks to scripting, I have a far fuller idea of how to convey this story in a more narratively interesting way. That's why scripting is so important. It allows you to organize the linear events in a way that doesn't sacrifice on detail and nuance, as the wanted poster scene at the end creates intrigue for the reader, making them more likely to come back for more. Step 3. Storyboard. Now, for storyboarding, I recommend storyboard every page for a chapter. I realize many of y'all are making webcomics instead of manga-style pages. Manga chapters tend to be a bit longer than webtoon episodes. Storyboarding everything allows you time to get your pacing right in one swoop. If you just draw a comic page by page with just a script, oftentimes the story feels rushed to a degree. Pacing is very important in the comic as readers tend to spend very little time on one page before going to the next. So learning how to complement that so readers' speed matches the pace of the narrative without being redundant or boring. That's where plot relevance comes in. With the first page, I set an expectation, an older fantasy-type town on a prairie, so the reader gets a general vibe for the setting. Then I go to a man inside an inn room trying to fix his leg, which he is clearly struggling with. On the second page, you can see him giving up and lamenting that he needs oil. American government. As the process of leaving the room and later the inn itself doesn't serve much narrative value other than helping infer Volkarn is a traveler, I don't need to add it. It will be pretty apparent in later parts of this chapter he is a traveler, which makes it relatively unimportant to make apparent right now. On the third page is when I make the transition. He said he needed fire oil, now he's out in the markets looking. On this page, you get to see the full reason as to why he's looking for fire oil, as his mechanical foot is squeaking. I do think it was really important to add this transition page before depicting him in the shop looking for oil, for a few reasons. One being that it shows very clearly the problem we need to solve, his squeaky leg, and how it draws attention to him. The other being that it helps not rush the sequence of events. A page or two of transition really helps the progression feel natural, which is why I think it's so important to do storyboards of the entire chapter before rendering anything. It helps so much at keeping the story on pace. Step 4, draw. Here's the fun part, drawing the actual comic. This can take a lot of commitment due to how daunting lining all the pages can be, especially if you have a more detailed style like mine. But stick to it, it's worth it. I mean, what else are you gonna do with your time anyway? Watch TikTok? Jelk it to Dutch van der Linde for 12 hours? Look, I understand. I'm a sympathetic person and all, but you wanna know what's really hot? Discipline. Most days I wake up and I don't want to get up. Then I get up anyway and work on art because you have to chop off my limbs to keep me away from that. There isn't much narrative advice I can give here, as it's just the process of finalizing the foundation you've already made. Don't overcrowd small panels with details. Whatever you detail the most will be in focus, which will wash out the narrative value of your story when the reader is wondering why the barrel in the background is so gorgeous. Be careful when you're drawing feet. If you draw them too good, people will think you're into them. You need a good middle ground for good and bad feet drawings. Enough jokes. It's important for your layout to be visually intriguing and dynamic from page to page. Don't just draw a bunch of squares. A few ways to do this is by letting certain things bleed outside the bounds of the panels, or just not adding panels to certain images. Have fun with it, get creative. You want your readers to feel something unique when consuming your story. Another very important part of making visually appealing and understandable comics is backgrounds. For the love of all gods, don't just draw floating heads talking to each other. That doesn't work. If your reader ever asks, where is this happening right now? You've failed. Go sit in the moron corner. I understand this can be a very hard one because backgrounds are very hard to draw. I get it. I struggle with them a lot. But making a comic will push your creative limits no matter what you do. So might as well do it right. Last step, step 5, lettering. Lettering can be a difficult one. It was for me. I struggled to find the right size for letters and, well, had a hard time finding the right font. I ended up just looking up fonts used in manga and downloaded the one I thought that looked most appropriate for my style, and then uploading it onto my drawing program, which is Clip Studio Paint. It is very important not to overcrowd text bubbles. If your character has a lot to say, please, I'm begging you, cut it up into different shots, different panels, I don't know. Yapping on and on forever will bore your reader and make them feel like they're reading a book. If you're able to show, don't tell. That is one thing that is beyond easy considering you're making a visual media. Honestly, even flashbacks are better off just drawn and not put in text bubbles. People are reading a comic for a reason. If they wanted to read Dostoevsky, sweetheart, they would have. That's all I have for today, folks. If you like my art and are interested in commissioning me, you can reach out to me on Instagram, Discord, and Blue Sky, all in the description in my link tree. Regardless, you have work tomorrow, or school, or pretending to be an authority on comic making. But as always, don't dream about wheat-based byproducts. I ain't got no father, I ain't got no father, I ain't got no father to buy the clothes I wear. I'm a poor lonesome cowboy.